Hello, everyone joining us. We'll get started in just a minute. We'll let more people join, and then we'll begin. Okay, I don't want to hold us up, so I'll get started. And then this is being recorded, so anyone that's just popping on now, we'll have everything. So welcome to the Using Mobile Coach Knowledge Base feature to create a chatbot with all the answers. It's a long title, but it'll be a good session. So today we're going to learn about getting a chatbot to have all the answers. So creating kind of a brain for your chatbot so it can answer on-demand questions. And today we have Sterling Mason, who will be our presenter for this session. He currently leads the client services team and is a senior chatbot designer and has been building chatbots for an incredibly long time. And I feel like he himself has all the answers. In our 2 sessions ago, the team from Dell were saying how helpful Sterling was at helping them build their chatbot. So I'm excited to hear what he has to say with this. If you'd like to follow or connect with Sterling, his LinkedIn QR code is on there. Oh, Joey's here! Yay! Thank you. Okay, Sterling, go ahead, take it away. I will be here. Just kidding. I forgot my housekeeping. I got so excited about Sterling talking. I will be here to monitor the chat and the Q&A. So along the way, please ask questions. Let's chat. Let's talk about things. If you could change your chat to everyone so we can all benefit from each other's conversation. And as I said, this is being recorded, and the slides will be up this afternoon. Okay, Sterling, I think that's everything I need to say. I'll be here, but you can go ahead and take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate that intro. Glad to have everybody joining in today. So thanks for the intro, Corey. My name is Sterling. Been a chatbot designer for many years here at Mobile Coach, and I'm excited to talk through knowledge-based functionality today. Like Corey mentioned, love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. If you, looks like the QR code turned out a little blurry today. You can probably pretty easily find me with this image on LinkedIn as well. Shout out at the beginning to day 2 of Mobile Coach t-shirt history. So sort of the second Mobile Coach t-shirt design rocking today. We'll see what we have tomorrow. Okay, so let's dive in here. Hopefully you've all joined in today hoping to learn a little bit about what a knowledge base is, what a knowledge base chatbot can do for you, what steps we might go through to set up a knowledge base for a chatbot. And we're going to get our hands a little dirty looking at some actual script documents, take a peek behind the curtain at how we would set up some knowledge base items on our platform. So a little bit more hands-on today. As we go along, I'll endeavor to kind of pause along the way for some questions, but please just feel free to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll answer as we go along. So here's a quick overview of what we'll be talking through today, talking about knowledge base, getting to try it out. We've got a demo for you to try out today. And with that, let's jump right in. So starting right at the very beginning, what is a knowledge base? I like to think of it as kind of a big bank of info that users can access sort of at their convenience as they wish. So self-service access to information. In a chatbot, a knowledge base can provide information to users in a couple of interesting cases. So if a user is engaged with a chatbot for other purposes, we saw some really great examples in the client showcase today from Dell and Emma Weber's awesome work. And those chatbots are providing, a specific, they have kind of a specific purpose: training, reinforcement, and coaching support. So plugging in knowledge base access to a chatbot that hasn't otherwise, has an existing focus, gets information into that experience for users where they're already used to engaging with the chatbot, right? So it's an additional way that they can draw value from the chatbot. And a chatbot is a great way to sort of in an automated fashion point users to resources. So kind of harking back to Corey's discussion last hour about new hire onboarding chatbots, a lot of information for new hires to process early on the job. And so being able to easily point users to PDFs and job aids and links to other resources through the chatbot that they can request at any time. So I think Corey made a really great point. Like, a new hire might sometimes be a little bit embarrassed having to ask about the something the third time that week, right? It's takes practice to get that knowledge retention. And so rather than having to ask their manager multiple times and feel a little bit embarrassed about that, they can ask the chatbot for that information. So that eases the friction in that experience. And as users get comfortable with engaging with the chatbot, then it becomes really almost second nature to just check in with the chatbot and ask for a resource. So let's look at how a knowledge-based chatbot can really answer a lot of questions for users. So things to consider for why you might want to implement a knowledge-based chatbot. If you've got an audience that is struggling to get the information they need, maybe the info is contained already somewhere, like in a database or lots of other pages, for instance, on your website. But if it takes a lot of clicks to navigate through menus and things like that, it might just be a little bit difficult for users to actually get that info. They might resort to just messaging someone on Teams or on Slack and asking around for that info. If it requires asking a person, that person kind of becomes the bottleneck for that knowledge. And then if there are questions that don't have existing answers right now, then they can be tricky for an organization to answer. And that's a little bit of a bigger topic that there's more work to be done when an audience has questions but ready answers don't exist. So that's something we'll tackle a little bit down the road. We've already kind of hinted at this idea that scaling is an important element here. So if you have an audience of 2 people serviced by 1 manager, pretty easy for that manager to answer their questions. Once you start having larger and larger organizations, though, having hundreds or thousands of people with questions, that scaling becomes an issue. And so having an automated, access to information becomes extra important. Maybe some of your existing solutions aren't working. This might kind of circle back to that first bullet point here. Users having a hard time getting the answers they need. And then I guess that links in too with making the experience as frictionless as possible. So if someone has to type out a message and send it to another peer or a manager or something, there might be a little bit of emotional investment that has to go into that. Hey, I'm reaching out to you for help. Can you, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot easier to just ask a chatbot for that info if it's easy to get there. And then the experience of engaging with a chatbot, that users can chat with the chatbot, kind of tying in with the scaling issue, right? Like, you can engage with another human, ask them questions, get maybe some follow-up about a topic. That might not be as possible if the info is just living on, say, a web page somewhere. But in a chatbot, you could design more conversation and more follow-up about a topic. Maybe the chatbot delivers a resource that a user asked for, and then asks the user if that resource satisfied them, or if they have additional questions. Maybe if they have additional questions, the chatbot then connects them to a help desk or further information, right? So there are elements of that chat or the engagement that makes a chatbot a really cool tool for providing knowledge-based content to users. With that said, we're going to park on this slide for just a little bit, but before we kind of dive into our example here, if there are any questions so far about what is a knowledge base, if you have something at your organization you use that, hey, is this a knowledge base? Does this count? Yeah, feel free to chime in the chat or in the Q&A. And Corey's sort of monitoring, playing host for us. So Corey, if anything pops up, just chime in and let me know.
Okay, yes. I'm sorry, I'm getting them in the chat.
Oh, the link's perfect. So in the chat here, momentarily, Corey's going to drop in
there we go.
the links to try out this knowledge-based chatbot. This chatbot actually has a lot of functionality going on for it. So we're going to take a look at a couple of elements of it as we move forward here. I'm going to go ahead and actually jump over to the web version of the chatbot here. Let's pop this open. And Corey, help me know if this is okay. Looks like hopefully you all can see my the web view of the chatbot here. Awesome, cool. So I popped open the web version here, our concierge chatbot, and we're going to go ahead and start chatting here for just a moment. Let's see. Very excited to have you on the Old McDonald's Farm team. My name is Mac. I'll be here to answer your questions, etc. To start off, what's your first name? I'll type in. Sterlo is the name that I use on all the chatbot testing I do on the platform. And we'll see Old McDonald's Farm, the chatbot, show up with a menu here for me to interact with. Let me zoom in here just a little bit. So here's here's a really awesome way to present knowledge-based info to a user, at least the tip of the iceberg. So there are a lot of different categories here that we could choose from, and we present them to a user here with easy to click buttons so that they can then dive into whatever their selection is. This keyword, as you can see here, menu, you can text menu to access this menu at any time. So anytime later on down the road that I was, a week or two into the job here on Old McDonald's Farm, I could always just type menu and summon this list of buttons again to access these different knowledge base options. So really simple, pretty easy to remember as well. To start off with, I think I'll click acronyms. Let's zoom out just a little bit here. And okay, so our employees love to use texting acronyms. Not sure what they mean. Ask me a common texting acronym and I'll get you the definition. Let's try out, well, they suggest LOL. So let's try that one. Laughing out loud. Okay, so really simple, right? These sorts of, and here's a little bit of that chat functionality right after the fact. If we extrapolate this example though, text speak, that seems like a pretty simple example, but think about all of the acronyms that you might have in your organization and how frankly intimidating they can be for a new person on the team, right? We've heard from a lot of teams over the years that acronyms are actually one of the surprisingly challenging elements of a lot of positions, learning new elements of your job. So here's where it's pointing us back to, I'm going to select the main menu, bring us back to that overall menu. But hopefully this gives you a little sense, and hopefully you've been able to play around a little bit as well on your side with some of the different options here. And so let's jump back over to the slides, and If you haven't yet joined, the sign up info is in the chat. So feel free to take a peek there and you can choose either Teams or Web Widget. I wanted to move us forward to kind of talking about the workflow really quick before we dive into, sorry, let me just back us up for one moment. Okay. I want to talk about the workflow here before we dive into the different specific ways that we can set up a knowledge base on a chatbot, because this is going to play a role for each of the different routes that we choose. You're probably playing around with the old McDonald Farm chatbot right now and might see some of the different ways to present that info. We'll talk through that in the next couple slides, but this is the sort of workflow that we'll follow for each of them. So we want to lay it out right up front here. So starting off with the actual information itself. This is super critical. This is kind of one of the driving factors of setting up a knowledge-based chatbot. What is the info that users need access to? And where is it? Is it already sort of collated somewhere that users maybe already have access to, but you want to streamline that? Or does it not exist anywhere, and this process is going to be lengthier, gathering the important info? It's kind of an important foundational piece to think through. Do we have the info we need? Where is it? How can we organize it? And we'll look at a couple different ways to organize that info here momentarily. Next up is going to be, based on the info we want to share, how should we write or put that information into the chatbot? And we'll take a look at that in more detail. Then we'll actually do the configuration, setting this content up inside the Mobile Coach platform. Once we've got it set up, it's time to test. Want to test as thoroughly as we can. Obviously, if our knowledge base has got 1,000 items in it, say we have an acronym database that's 1,000 items long, that's too many items to maybe test. But as thoroughly as possible, let's test through all of the knowledge base functionality that we set up. And that iteration kind of flows into the maintenance phase. And again, the cycle continues. Once we are up and running, once we have users and can see data about the usage of our knowledge base, we might uncover, oh, we need to tweak this, or a lot of people are asking about this thing that we don't actually have in the knowledge base yet. Let's get that added. So depending on the route we choose for setting up a knowledge base, we'll have some sort of different routes for adding to it, and we'll see that here moving forward. So with that said, and I think this cycle, you've probably seen this if you've been checking in any of the other chatbot design or use case discussions we've had so far at the conference. So this sort of cycle kind of applies to chatbots in general, whether it's general chatbot design or here setting up a knowledge base. And we'll probably continue to see it as we go through the rest of the conference. Let's then sort of step forward into talking about the actual technical or process elements of setting up a knowledge base. 3 big buckets we want to focus on here: scripted knowledge bases, as we're calling them, using a spreadsheet to create a much larger kind of database, or plugging into an API to pull information from some other resource. Okay, so let's start out with the scripted approach. Some bullet points to consider as we start talking about this option. The scripted approach allows us to build knowledge base items in a more kind of conversational flow. We'll look at the actual script for the concierge or Old McDonald's Farm chatbot that we just tried out here in a moment, and you can see some examples of scripting those elements, providing information through menus, just like we were trying out in the concierge chatbot. We can actually build in branching logic and conversational pathways, starting maybe with a broad question and then narrowing in based on different options users select. that all of this is possible because we can use all of the functionality of the mobile coach platform to build questions and let users choose different ways to answer those questions. So here are a couple examples to keep in mind for that. So you might have product information that someone queries the sort of broad bucket, and then the chatbot asks follow-up questions to narrow in on specific details that the user might need to know. Or if there's more complex questions, right, that follow-up is an important process to kind of narrow in on the actual nitty-gritty of something the user wants to know. So this kind of functionality is really fits in well with scripting knowledge base items. So let's go take a look really quick at a script over here. So here's our script for this concierge chatbot. You can see it's just written as a regular chatbot script here in this document. And here's a really simple example of writing that menu option, right? So we've got just like the different buttons that we'd like here listed as bullet points. We could even come in here and just make a note for ourselves and say something like buttons for the bullet points, just to remind ourselves what those are for. And then over here, in our easy info column, we can see if someone selects that acronyms button, then it can move on to this message right here. But then there's also follow-up messaging. So if someone asks let's actually scroll on down here to this next one. So if someone picks benefits, right, then we can have an additional buttons menu. And then if someone were to pick, insurance, we can have follow-up messaging based on that selection. So you can kind of see how we start with a bigger question, narrow in to a more specific topic. So that's a sort of straightforward way to set up a like knowledge-based content within a script like this. And we can actually come take a look at the setup on the mobile coach platform. So we'll just log in here. And when we're on the platform, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the platform, there's kind of a lot going on here. Don't worry, it's can be a lot to look at for your first time. But what we're going to take a look at here is what we call our preconditions feature. I just want to give you a little peek behind the curtain here. So these are going to be knowledge-based items based on specific, what we call a precondition that a user can trigger at any time. So zoom in a little bit here. Here's this menu option, right? User can text the word menu or type it at any time and pull up this message right here. That's the one that we saw in our chat. And it's got a bunch of buttons that then have different conditions based on what people pick, but then they go on to different rules in the chatbot, different follow-up messages. So that benefits one, if we follow on down here, it itself is also a precondition. Someone could actually just type benefit into the chat and it would pull up this submenu based on their choices here. That'll then go on to a following message. So this is a way to take that script, plug it in here using our precondition feature. And the preconditions, let me emphasize, are really great because they let you build conversational elements into the knowledge base really straightforwardly. Because you can use all of the kind of script and post condition functionality that the mobile coach platform is known for, you can build whole branching pathways going down this route. So just a quick little peek here. Let's jump back over to our slides, and we'll move on to thinking about the next route we can take with a knowledge base, which is setting up a knowledge base through a larger spreadsheet sort of bank of content. Before we jump into this this discussion, though, again, I'll just plug the chat, the Q&A. If you have any questions along the way, what might make us choose one route or the other, we'll touch on that as we keep moving forward, but feel free to chime in. I'm happy to answer questions along the way. So let's start talking about a different route for setting up a knowledge base. You'll notice if we come back and look at our platform setup here, each of these items is something that we're like configuring, as we call it, on the platform individually. So here's the acronym message, and here's the benefit message, and it has a bunch of logic set up with it. You could imagine if you have 100 acronyms that you want as individually searchable terms, that starts to look like 100 different, individual messages here. That might start to be a lot. And then even beyond that, right? Say there are 500 knowledge base items you want to give people access to. If we're talking about something like product knowledge, right? Say someone needs to send in a specific product SKU and get some information back about that. You might have hundreds and hundreds of those product SKUs in your database. So this route, going the scripted route using preconditions, is really powerful, but it does require more work if we have tons and tons of items that we want to give people access to. So a different route we can take is using a spreadsheet to create that whole database. So this makes sense that we've got a really large library of FAQs or acronyms or other items. It's important to note here that this works really well if we don't have a need for follow-up conversation. This functionality works really well as a database a user can query from and get a response. But if we want people to be able to have like follow-up conversation, this isn't as applicable for that sort of situation. And this definitely feels like a more transactional experience. You just query a term and get a response. There's not much of that conversational element like we had in the scripted or precondition based route. So some examples here, acronyms are a big one. That's our example right here. That's the example we looked at in the demo. Simple questions, whether HR or otherwise, easy to answer in like a message. Job aids, again, right? Like product information might be really great to query. Hey, I need to know this piece of product info about that matches this SKU or this code or whatever. Get a simple return of that information. So let's take a look at that spreadsheet. Here's actually that exact spreadsheet. I'll go ahead and zoom in here just a little bit. Really easy to set up on your side. We've got essentially two columns. You can think of them as the question and the answer. So what's the item that a user would text or message into the chatbot that would then return a specific answer? So here's, a big list of, almost three, I guess there's some spaces. So we'll say, 250 to 300 acronyms here. Building all of these as preconditions and scripting them in the main sort of script view of the chatbot would take some definite time. So a really great option here for us is actually taking this spreadsheet, we turn it into a CSV, upload it to the chatbot. There's a specific section within the content section of every chatbot, or if we come all the way across here, the knowledge base feature. So we've been kind of talking about knowledge bases as a general concept. There's a specific feature on the platform called knowledge bases, and it lets us have a big database or spreadsheet, basically, of terms uploaded straight to the chatbot. And then there's some functionality we can plug in on the script side that lets people access this database. So this is just, let's see, over here we've got an import. We can basically just import a CSV file and get all of these terms added in as you see them here in this list. So a really easy way to take a huge bank of information, get it added to the chatbot. Now assembling that information might take more effort, right? It might be in various places. So that's a big bullet point to keep in mind in designing your own knowledge base is that first step we talked about, where's the info? How am I going to like collate all of it into my knowledge base? So that's route 2, setting up a much larger library of information here. And then the third one that I'll call out here, we're just going to kind of touch on this a little bit. This is definitely the most complex route, is using an API to connect your chatbot to some other system, pulling info from that system based on API requests. So that requires the info to be in some other system and accessible. That system needs to have some API endpoints that we can connect to and make those requests to. So your CRM or your LMS might have those endpoints already ready to go, might be straightforward to set up. If not, it tends to be a heavier lift, might need to get some resources to build those endpoints if this route would be the most effective way to give users access to that info. So again, this is sort of the most technical of the options. And so if you suspect that you might have all the info you need and it's already packaged in a system that has easy API access, this route might make the most sense to go down. So now that we've sort of talked through the ways to find and package the information to get it into the chatbot, thinking about designing the actual user experience here. So if we have a chatbot whose purpose is just answering a knowledge base, or I guess answering user questions, functioning as a knowledge base, the whole chatbot functionality can be geared towards that. If we're plugging a knowledge base into a chatbot that has a broader goal or design, that's a bit of a different situation. But the ways users access knowledge bases can be the same across both. Just in thinking through the design, you might need to remind users in a regular, in sort of a chatbot experience focused on training reinforcement, for instance. You might need to remind them over time that this functionality exists. If they're used to just receiving messages from the chatbot and engaging with them, it might make sense to kind of drop in, hey, and remember, you can text whatever the keywords are at any time to XYZ. If instead the chatbot is just focused on answering acronym questions from users, then they're probably much more, it's probably much more straightforward about what the chatbot functionality is. We intro it at the beginning, and then users can continue to engage with it over time. Maybe in that sort of a situation, the chatbot does chime in once a week, every other week, once a month. If users are just subscribed in perpetuity, it can be good for the chatbot to just check in and say, hey, I'm still here to help you if you have any questions. If not, no worries. So some important thoughts to keep in mind. But to drill down here into the specifics, how the chatbot answers a question, we've got buttons. As you saw in the demo we looked at, these buttons are a great resource in chatbots that can support them. So on the web, obviously, Microsoft Teams and so on. Buttons are a really user-friendly interface, and users are almost universally used to using them. The other option, sort of in the split here for the easy options and the more complex options, the other easy option is just open keywords, right? Inform users what the keywords are, and then let them message in those keywords at their convenience. So at the beginning of the concierge chatbot, we had the chatbot say, you can text menu at any time to bring up this menu. Users aren't, there's not a menu button along the way that people click. They just type menu and send it in, and that summons that knowledge base item. Those are the two main sort of easy ways to think about integrating the knowledge base into the user experience. So buttons easy to think about. You present a message with buttons in it. The other option is going to be that open text sort of keyword. And in that case, you're going to need to inform users what those keywords are. So think about that as you sort of plan your script. What's the best moment to inform people about the different knowledge-based functionality? Where does it make sense to tell them about the keywords? I would recommend that's often at the beginning, as users, either as part of onboarding or really early in the experience. But if it makes sense to package some of those keywords later on, and maybe once a user has unlocked extra functionality or something in the chatbot, that's something to think through. So the two more complex routes for answering a user's question are going to be Amazon Lex natural language processing, or what we call sort of search. So implementing an NLP engine is a more robust way of parsing user response, but it's robust not only in its functionality, but also in the time and cost required in that setup. So you have to train this natural language processing element to understand like the user intents. And then the engine itself that powers it will go to work processing the user's request, and then we can then address that. The other big route here, search, is not to be confused with NLP, and it's meant for like taking a user's query and matching it against a big volume of data. And so at Mobile Coach, we do have a sort of generic search engine that can compare a user's query against some available data sets. And so then it's more of just like a pure search, right? Someone inputs a term, and then we use the search engine to go look at whatever the data sets are. So these are both much more complex to implement. If they sound interesting or sound like more the route that you would need to take, then these are both areas that we'd definitely want to consult with you. First two routes, setting up buttons or generic sort of keywords, those are easier and really easy to kind of plug in through the easy authoring platform. The second two options require more integration, so time and cost as well. So keep those in mind as you think about the route that would make sense for your chatbot. Okay, we are coming to the last couple of slides here. So, and I've seen a little bit of just sort of movement in my peripheral in the chat. Corey, anything that makes sense for us to chime in on here?
Brent and I had a chat about content and message. I think we're good to keep going.
Cool.
Or Brett and I. But anyone else, please put some things in the chat, and we'll be ready for Q&A.
Cool. So, in thinking about the content that you might want to provide to users, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. And looking at all these different categories here, that could feel overwhelming too. And a principle that I think could be useful to keep in mind is it's important, or I should say, I would recommend that we start with what's manageable. And general recommendation would be pick one thing that would be really valuable to your users and start with that. You can always flesh out and build in more functionality over time. That iteration cycle with a chatbot, right? Rather than tackling 5 different categories of content you might want to give users access to, let's start with one and then get it implemented, test it out, get users using it. And we might learn some valuable things about how users are engaging with that knowledge base that would inform the choices we make with other categories. So start manageable and then grow from there. I think that's a good principle just in general chatbot design. So some common categories here, right? We talked about acronyms at length at this point. Being able to look up information. So maybe your LMS has access to a really big bank of courses and training, letting users, rather than scrolling through big lists or 10 items per page, keep clicking to the next page to keep looking, right? It might be much easier to just look through, ask a chatbot. Maybe there's even broad categories of those courses that users could, oh, hey, I want something about improving my coaching. Then the chatbot could filter down to a much more specific list and go from there. FAQs are a really popular choice. They some jobs, you might have 5 or 10 FAQs, really easy to package in to a chatbot with preconditions, make them conversational if you'd like to. If you've got more like 50, 100 or more FAQs, years and years of sort of accumulated knowledge for the job, then you might go the spreadsheet approach. Let users access that whole bank of items there. A really cool bit of functionality, thinking about that process of sending in a keyword to a chatbot. I bet that you could imagine all sorts of different things that you could add to a chatbot using that functionality. One that I think is really cool is, as we see listed here, a feedback module. A user is going along, receiving messaging from a chatbot a couple times a week, but the chatbot has informed them, hey, if you have feedback about either the content or whatever, maybe a course or a workshop the chatbot's supporting, or if you have feedback about the chatbot, just type the word feedback at any point and send that as a keyword. And that could summon up a question from the chatbot that says, awesome, I'm excited to gather your feedback. What do you want to share? And then the user response there can be saved and either viewed in reporting, could even just get that to trigger a notification to whoever's overseeing the chatbot, a notification with that user's feedback in it, if you want it to be more kind of immediately actionable. Lots of other knowledge-based items that you could build that same sort of idea, right? Like if you want to give users instant access to some sort of module, as we might call it, then consider setting that up as a knowledge base. So again, benefits, job aids, on-the-job tools. Maybe there are some specific coaching tools or forms or templates that managers might find useful, giving them instant access. Hey, I've got a one-on-one coming up in 30 minutes. Oh, what's that active listening model? I want to kind of review that before this one-on-one. They can just go to the chatbot they use, type in, tools, or even maybe something more specific like active listening, and could then get that content right there without needing to go find it in folders or on web pages or anything like that. So a lot of food for thought here. Hopefully this kind of gets your gears churning, gets some juices flowing about ways you could provide access to this kind of information for folks using your chatbots. And here, as we kind of come to the end, I want to zoom us out a little bit to think about the big picture. So we talked a little bit throughout there about the user experience of engaging with a knowledge base. Keep that user experience in mind throughout the whole design process. I think often we'll start from there, right? Hey, we've got all this content we want to give people access to. It's not a great, it's not packaged really well right now. It's on lots of web pages or hard to find, things like that. That user experience is something we want to improve on. So let's package it into an easy to use chatbot. But let that continue to drive the experience as you write your script and as you test. Is this straightforward? Is this easy for users to use? In that testing, maybe bring some folks in from your team who aren't as involved in setting up the chatbot, who can just be, testers, guinea pigs. Be like, hey, you're not, neck deep in the whole coolness of the chatbot. Just try out this functionality for us. Thinking through how each of the pieces fits into the overall user experience. This is really key if your chatbot has some other main focus and we're adding a knowledge base to it. If our chatbot is built to achieve a certain goal, say support a workshop or a training that users go to help that knowledge retention after the fact. Let's keep the focus there, but let this knowledge base element support that. And I mean that in that, let's not get our balance out of whack, right? Sink so much time into building out this knowledge base when we have this more focused goal for the chatbot. So keep that overall experience in mind and what your goals for the chatbot are. Thinking through the most intuitive ways to access a chatbot, those two different easy routes, buttons and keywords. Which of those makes more sense for your users? Think about the channel you're using. If we're building an SMS-based chatbot, or a chatbot that's primarily going to plug into SMS as a channel, then buttons unfortunately aren't an option. And so we'll need to think about the best way to make keywords usable for users. And then, we already talked about goals a little bit, but make sure that a knowledge base isn't just, hey, we've got a bunch of info, let's add it, right? Make sure that the knowledge base items you're choosing to add support the overall goal of your chatbot. If we're targeting something as broad as we really need to support new employees and help them feel supported, then there might be tons of content that makes sense to plug in there. But if it's, hey, let's support this specific LMS course, the chatbot's just following up on this LMS course. I think Dell this morning talked about the goal of this chatbot. The chatbot's even introduced at the end of the course. So it might not make sense to plug in a huge range of other information when the chatbot is so focused. So those are kind of big picture questions. It's important to keep in mind throughout. And I think with that in mind, one other note that I would make is we've talked about different routes, those three main buckets, and maybe I'll zoom back through here really quick. Three main sort of strategies for including that information. Know that all of these can coexist, right? So we can have a big spreadsheet, and actually that's kind of the point of this demo we chose here on the concierge chatbot, right? All of those do coexist, right? Menu is a keyword that users can text at any time or type in here and summons this menu. As we saw in the setup, that's just set up using the sort of scripting with the precondition. But the acronyms feature, for instance, uses that big bank of uploads. Each of those acronyms isn't its own message in the script, it just lives in that database. So you can mix and mingle as it makes sense for your design. And that's where, coming back to the, I guess, to jump us back to the end, to the conclusion here, that big picture of the overall user experience. If it makes sense to focus on one, let's do that. If it makes sense to mix different routes, let's do that too. So hopefully that's some good food for thought as you think about the wealth of content that you have in your role and in your organization would want to package into a knowledge base. So just here at the very end, a kind of reinforcement for that process. We write, we test, we get users, and then we actually see what that engagement and what the data is looking like. And from there, we can start the cycle over again. So that iterative process, helping our chatbot learn and grow over time, really important here, especially when we've got lots and lots of items, like big databases of info. It's important to be really keyed into that testing and observing the user engagement so that we can just check in on, make sure that items are working as intended. Folks are getting answers to the questions they have. This can be an area where it might make sense to build in some additional functionality, to have the chatbot get people's feedback, right? Like that option we talked about. So we can gather as much of that intel on the user experience as possible. So with that said, that's sort of the knowledge base functionality, and would love to spend the remaining time talking through any questions that anyone has. Let me see if, let me pop open the chat here.
Thank you so much. Like, I think we don't have any questions yet.
Okay.
But one thought that I had as you were talking, because we talked through a lot of like this concierge chatbot, but maybe what is another use case that you could think of that like would really benefit from a knowledge-based chatbot?
Yeah, so a use case that I'm working on right now that I think is really cool, and let's see how best to describe it. So one of the organizations that I'm privileged to get to work with right now is building a DE&I based chatbot. So diversity and inclusion, and it's focused on a big calendar of events that take place throughout the year that are recognized throughout the company as a way to like broaden folks's understanding of other cultures and other religions and things like that. And so people can join the chatbot and get reminders about specific cultural events and different kinds of events at the company in order to decide what users want to receive. They answer a couple of questions, and they can go through that process again by typing in a keyword and summoning that sort of list of categories again. So they could change the types of messaging that they get in the future by re-summoning that menu, choosing different options, and then that'll actually impact the whole, the whole content of their experience moving forward. So someone might start out only picking one of the 5 categories, and then moving forward, they might decide, oh, I could really use some extra of these insights, and so they can always re-summon that menu, choose whatever options they want again. Another really easy knowledge base that's included there is there's a big actual calendar that's like an actual calendar people can go view. It's a lot to take in, but people can query that at any time just by typing calendar, and they'll get a link to that resource. So it's a really handy way for people who otherwise are pretty focused on their day-to-day job to get doses of reminders about inclusivity, and they can tailor that experience at any time by using that knowledge-based keyword to summon the menu over again, to totally shake up like the experience that they're having with the chatbot. So that's just one really specific example that I think is cool. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, in that sort of feedback vein, any item that you could think of that a user might want to be able to summon, I think is a great option to package in, especially if the chatbot isn't using a knowledge base currently. 2 or 3 keywords I think is a really simple addition to provide some really solid functionality for users.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, it doesn't look like we've gotten any other questions, so I think we can move forward. I just wanted to plug, do you have the schedule?
Let's see. It's I don't have it on slide here, but let me pull up.
Okay. Well, if you're not planning on it, we do have a working session for Tabitha's Way in just a couple of minutes. So we're going to move over there. And if for tomorrow, we'll start the day with another customer showcase. So if you want to see other cool examples of how people are actively using chatbots, please join. Then I'll be talking about performance support. So I'm going to take a lot of what Sterling did today and go a little bit more broad of what are the design elements that we can go and use in that type of chatbot. And then Sterling will be talking about metrics tomorrow and how to measure a chatbot success, which is hugely important for everyone. So highly recommend joining us tomorrow. And then on Thursday, we have one last customer showcase and then our closing keynote with Vince, where he's going to kind of wrap it all up. So thank you so much for joining us today. We also have a ton of recordings already. So today's recordings will be posted this afternoon. Yesterday's are all ready. So if you can't make anything live, feel free to join those. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Oh, Sterling's got it.
Yeah, here we go. So, yeah, for anybody who wants to take a quick peek here, here's the
Yes.
here's our schedule. So
Perfect. Yes. So here's what we have coming up tomorrow. Well, thank you
awesome.
again for joining. We'll see you later. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. See ya.